If I were to tell you a classic series that you should be watching, then the first to come to mind would be Cowboy Bebop, duh. But at a close second comes the series we're discussing today, one that was released only a few weeks prior to the big anime game changer and began the voice acting career of one of English's most well-known VAs. Trigun is a 26-episode action comedy series based on the original manga by Yasuhiro Natao and published by Tokuma Shoten, with Dark Horse Comics and Madman Entertainment as licensors for North America and Australia respectively. The anime from Studio Madhouse was released in spring of 1998, and as of this review you can find the series thanks to Funimation Entertainment, MVM Films, and Madman Entertainment. An original motion picture released over a decade after the original series in April 2010, known as Trigun Badlands Rumble, has also been licensed and is released by Funimation, Kaze UK, and Madman.
Vash the Stampede is a wanted man with a habit of turning entire frontier towns into rubble. The price on his head is a fortune, and his path of destruction reaches across the arid wastelands of a desert planet. Unfortunately, most encounters with the spiky-haired gunslinger don't end well for the bounty hunters who catch up to him. Someone almost always gets hurt, and it's never Vash. Oddly enough, for such an infamous fugitive, there's no proof that he's ever taken a life. In fact, he's a pacifist with a donut obsession who's more doofus than desperado. There's a whole lot more to him than his reputation lets on. Vash the Stampede definitely ain't your typical outlaw.
Well, did I work off the donuts and the $10 double dollars?
Can't be him. There's just no way.
For a product of the late 90s, the animation is really going to be hit or miss, depending on the viewer and what they feel constitutes as dated animation.
I'll admit, there are points where I felt that dated vibe coming from the series, however there were more times where I felt that it worked in the show's favor. Because of the setting and the obvious Old West inspiration the series has, that same gritty animation, I think, enhances the feel and the tone a lot more than it hinders it. It's simplistic in terms of backgrounds, but they allowed for rather expressive and detailed character designs that would flow and gel with the series very well. Then there's a soundtrack that is just marvelous. Mix together rock, classic Old West, and a dash of synth, and you get dozens of memorable tracks that manage to follow the mood and story rather seamlessly. This also includes the opening theme HT, which gives new meaning to the air guitar solo.
I am known as Valentines Alcalinella Zihak Shushira Boherets. Gambi Gobella, Blue Stradivari, Talentrent Pierre, Andre Chartenhemos, Ivano Vinci, Baldos George, Deutzel Kaiser III. Don't hesitate to call.
The story brings together action and comedy so well that I think it might have set a standard for future action comedy series like Soul Eater or Fullmetal Alchemist. Though Slayers might have been the true pioneers for this, but I haven't really seen it, so I can't really tell.
The basic storyline of Trigun is Vash and his everyday encounters with different people and trying to promote love and peace after a promise he made to his former caretaker Rem. Along the way, he meets people like the Insurance Girls and Wolfwood who, towards the end, learn to accept and share in Vash's ideals. But then it turns into Vash's past and his reasoning for never taking a single life. The change into that storyline isn't abrupt or thrown in at the last second. It's gradually weaved into the story, and this works very nicely. Albeit there are a couple full episodes midway that dedicate their time to Vash's past, but they don't hinder the series. They, in fact, enhance Vash's mindset and his beliefs up until the final episodes.
The story first and foremost is about Vash, and it does so in a way fitting of a classic old Western film. I say this because a lot of times classic Westerns revolve around one person, and 9 times out of 10 it's a rather infamous one. It's fun to see Trigun take this approach, but also make the stakes even higher thanks to the circumstances that we're in, because we actually learn this isn't even Earth that we are on, but a post-apocalyptic world. And over the course of the series, we learn how humanity has ended up on it. Really, the story just comes down to one man, a singular man with a singular desire, as well as donuts.
All right. Whoever did it, come out with your hands up right now!
Why are you pointing that thing at me?
Trigun's characters are a lot of fun to watch because they play that fine line between the serious tone and the humorous one rather well. But what's also rather interesting is that some of these characters have two sides to them, a kind of duality, if you will. For example, let's take the Insurance Girls. They are so determined and want to do their job so well, but then when it comes to the actual execution of it, they aren't doing very well because they kind of just wing it. And then there's also our wandering preacher, who's also a mercenary. This kind of duality makes for some rather interesting characters and interesting writing, with the biggest one of all, the most mysterious.
But let's go back to our major characters for a bit, because there are other qualities that I find rather interesting. With Millie Thompson and Mel Strife, these girls are wonderful counterparts to our two male characters for various reasons. For Millie, she's a bit of a goofball that has a hard time focusing, but she also has her head on her shoulders the most out of anyone, and can be rather insightful and clever without ever really acknowledging it. She's actually kind of oblivious to it, which makes those moments all the more fun to watch. As for Meryl, she's seen as the leader of the pair, the one who is very work-oriented, but she also has her fears and doubts. She actually takes a lot longer to accept who the real Vash is early on, and even begins to have a fondness for him over the course of the series. Her character is certainly a good support for Vash, as well as someone who has her own worries as she, just like everyone else, tries to actively figure out who Vash is. Then there's motherfucking Nicholas D. Wolfwood, a traveling priest who also happens to be a gun for hire. He has a strong sense of compassion, but also a large survival instinct that becomes a prominent feature of his throughout the series. Wolfwood, in a sense, is seen as rather opposite at times, balancing out Vash's ideas well, and creating some of the more interesting conflicts in the series, while his relationship to Millie is one of carefree compassion that Wolfwood just needs to complete him and get him through his days.
Now, I should talk about Knives, but I'm not going to, because this character is actually rather self-explanatory. Instead, I want to talk about Legato Bluesummers, the man seen as pretty much the villain of the majority of the series.
Although he is taking orders from Knives, Legato is the one creating the methods in order to achieve them, which can cause a lot of grief and suffering to dozens of people, with Vash as the most prominent. It's kind of like if you were to take some of the ideals that Wolfwood has, intensify them, and finally add a dash of disregard for human life. Aside of this, we don't know much about Legato in terms of origin, which is the scariest part. For our four major characters, we, at the minimum, hear about where they've come from or their families, but Legato is a complete and utter mystery.
Outside of these characters, development is rather limited to the baddie of the week, including the gung-ho guns. I think this is fine, leaving the thought of any more complexity of the series out and keeping our focus where it really should be.
Repeat carefully after me.
Okay,
This world is made.
this world is
This world is made of.
made of.
Made of love and peace.
The English dub is rather interesting as well as rather difficult to talk about at the same time. I say this because we don't exactly know when Trigun was released relative to the release of Cowboy Bebop stuff, which means if Bebop was the one that was released first, then it's possible Trigun falls into the bad dub category. But however, I still think the dub of Trigun is really good, minus a few acting problems that I've noticed.
For this, I'm starting with Bo Williams as Knives, because it was among one of the weaker areas in terms of performances I liked, mostly because it was sometimes borderline being hilarious when he's actually not trying to be. However, as his younger version, Joshua Seth made the character much more devious than his adult counterpart, and helped make the character overall much more fun to see. Richard Cancino takes on Legato Bluesummers under the name Richard Hayworth, and I found him to be a rather devious man that still maintained a sense of servitude by being this empty shell at points, which is reflected in Cancino's performance rather well. Leah Sargent's Millie and Dorothy Melandreas' Meryl were such wonderful listens as well, each bringing out the strengths and weaknesses that these two have, and exploring them to the fullest extent. And then there's Wolfwood, played by Jeff Nimoy, and it's certainly an amazing performance due to the struggles that he faces while being in contact with Vash. There are moments where the acting isn't at its strongest, but when he goes there, Nimoy goes there, creating a lot of memorable moments.
What's really saddening about all this is that the majority of these voice actors don't even do anime anymore. They didn't even come back for the film and they were replaced. It's just really depressing because I would have loved to have seen more from them. By now, you've probably noticed that I've been avoiding something rather important about Trigun. The single, most important thing that makes this series so wonderful. Vash the Stampede. Now, the reason I haven't been talking about him until now is because he actually brings in some different themes and philosophies that, for the time it was released, were rather new and interesting to the viewer.
Despite everything he goes through and the situations he gets himself in, there has never been a single casualty. Sure, people get injured and whole towns are destroyed, but no one ever dies. This is because Vash swore to never take someone's life and works his damnedest to keep others from doing the same, whether they are a good person or not. There are different sides to him that help support this, as we have both the carefree and goofy side, as well as the serious and more badass side when he's truly up against the wall, making that duality comment I made earlier the more noticeable here. The first episode of the series alone shows us that you can't tell which side truly is Vash, or if there's more sides that we never even get to see. From beginning to end, Vash is a complete mystery to us, and what he represents and tries to get others to see is what makes this series exciting and much more interesting.
As for his first time in the ring of voice acting, Johnny Young Bosch plays both sides of Vash's character really well, making for what I feel is his best work. As for Little Vash, because some people may not actually know this, we have Bryce Papenbrook. That's right, folks, the same person who's become popular in recent years thanks to leading roles in SAO and Attack on Titan. Now, my love-hate relationship with Papenbrook and his work is still ongoing. However, as our tiny little outlaw, it's still one of the most memorable alongside Attack on Titan, as well as more recently, Blood Lad. By Sundown, Trigun proves itself time and time again to be a classic series. Sure, there are parts of it that don't hold up well today, but there are still other parts of it that are simply amazing. I can't recommend the series enough for its story and characters, as well as the beginning of one of North America's most well-known English voice actors. You have to be crazy not to watch this series at some point, and probably be even more crazy not to find some sort of enjoyment out of it. There's a reason why very, very few people dislike the series, and more reason why a lot of people highly recommend it. Next time, we may or may not get hit in the head by a bass guitar. So until then, otaku on, my friends.